On the 2nd of May 2016, Claudio Ranieri was in Rome visiting his 96-year-old mother when Chelsea equalized against Tottenham at Stamford Bridge. The goal meant Spurs couldn't win the title. It meant Leicester City were champions of England. Ranieri's mother reportedly burst into tears. So did half of Leicester. It was the night that proved football is the greatest sport on the planet. They had started that season as 5,000 to 1 outsiders. By May, they were champions of England. Not just underdogs, a team that had been fighting relegation the previous year. A group of players that nobody particularly wanted. A manager who had just been sacked by Greece after a defeat to the Faroe Islands. Their tactics were almost embarrassingly simple. Defend, recover the ball, find Mahrez, feed Vardy. And it worked. Vardy broke the record for scoring in consecutive Premier League games, hitting the back of the net in 11 matches in a row. Mahrez became the first African and Algerian player to win the PFA Players of the Year. They won the league by 10 points. 10! The morning after, newspapers around the world scrambled for superlatives. Italy called Ranieri King Claudio. Spain ran Milagro Leicester. The Wall Street Journal led with Leicester City completes its implausible run. The whole world had watched, and the whole world had been moved. It was the kind of story that makes people fall in love with sport. 10 years later, a 2-2 draw at home to Hull City confirmed Leicester City's relegation to League One. Fans booed the players onto the pitch before kickoff and chanted, "You're not fit to wear the shirt," as they trudged off at the end. The chairman was met with, "Get out of our club." This is one of the most brutal falls in English football history, and it was almost entirely self-inflicted. The cracks appeared sooner than anyone wanted to admit. In February 2017, despite Leicester being in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, Ranieri was sacked. They would go on to finish 14th that season. A title-winning manager was shown the door 9 months after the greatest achievement in the club's history. That decision, rushed and poorly justified at the time, set a tone that would haunt them for years. Then came October 2018. On the 27th, a helicopter carrying club owner Vichai Srivaddhanaprabha lifted off from the pitch at the King Power Stadium after a match against West Ham. The tail rotor failed. The aircraft spun out of control, crashed in the car park 200 meters from the stadium, and burst into flames. Vichai, the pilot, and 3 others were killed. He had been revered by the support in a way that went beyond ordinary affection, and his loss left a hole at the heart of the club that was never adequately filled. His son, Ayawat, known as Top, inherited the club. What followed was a prolonged lesson in how quickly things can unravel without the right hand on the wheel. Brendan Rodgers, who had replaced Claude Puel in 2019, did well initially. Back-to-back 5th-place finishes, an FA Cup win over Chelsea in 2021, a Conference League semi-final in 2022. But behind the decent seasons, the finances were rotting. In the summer of 2021, rather than selling players to balance the books, Leicester signed Patson Daka, Boubakary Soumare, and Yannick Vestergaard for around £55 million while recouping less than $4 million in sales. Pre-tax losses that year tripled to £92.5 million, a club record. Rodgers had warned publicly that the money wasn't there. The board didn't listen or couldn't act. When the time came to sack Rodgers, they waited far too long, leaving interim boss Dean Smith just 8 games to try to save their Premier League status. It wasn't enough. In 2022-23, despite having Jamie Vardy, Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, and Yuri Tielemans in the squad, players any mid-table club would have paid well for, Leicester were relegated. There was at least a brief moment of light. Enzo Maresca arrived, brought structure and intelligence to everything he touched, and led Leicester back as championship winners, a record 8th second-tier title, with Vardy hitting 18 goals at 37 years old to help get them there. It felt like a reset. Then Maresca left for Chelsea. and from that moment, it became almost operatically bad. Steve Cooper was appointed and sacked after 12 Premier League games. Ruud van Nistelrooy replaced him and won 5 of his 27 matches. They were relegated again, this time with 5 games to spare, having conceded 80 league goals, the most in their Premier League history. They went 9 home games in a row without a score, losing all of them. 9 home games without a goal. This was a club that had won the title. So, when they came back down to the championship this season, you could be forgiven to expect the floor to hold. They had Premier League caliber players. They had parachute payments. They had a squad that most in the second tier would have envied. By October, they were still 4th, just 1 defeat in 10 games, encouraging and promising even. Then they fell apart completely. On the 5th of February 2026, Leicester were deducted 6 points for breaching profit and sustainability rules during their championship-winning season of 2023-24. 6 points handed back at the worst possible moment, at a club already sliding. Without the deduction, they would still have been in the drop zone, 1 point from safety. The punishment didn't create the problem. It just confirmed that the problem was years in the making and nobody had been brave enough to fix it. Even now, playing in the 3rd tier, their wage bill stands at 82% of turnover. Recruitment had been a catastrophic failure for years. Too many average players handed large contracts, too many signings without relegation clauses, and too much money paid out to players who simply weren't good enough. When Wrexham bought Connor Cody for £2 million in the summer of 2025, Leicester still had to contribute to his wages. That sentence alone tells you almost everything you need to know. The atmosphere at the King Power deteriorated to something unrecognizable. The relationship between players and supporters had turned toxic. Harry Winks was involved in an expletive-laden exchange with fans as he boarded the team bus after a defeat at Portsmouth, a midfielder who had clashed with 3 of the last 4 managers, yet whose nickname the club's social media still cheerfully deployed. Winning just 17 of 82 league matches across the last 2 seasons, across 2 consecutive relegations, that is the statistical wreckage left behind. The night it ended, Oliver McBurney's equalizer for Hull in the 63rd minute extinguished whatever hopes remained. 2-2, relegated to League One. The first time Leicester had been in the 3rd tier since 2009. Fans stayed behind after the final whistle to protest outside the ground. The chairman's statement said, "As chairman, that responsibility sits with me. There are no excuses." It was the right thing to say. It was also, in the context of everything that had happened, far too late. What comes next is genuinely uncertain. Parachute payments will keep shrinking. They'll be around £10 million lower next season than this one, and disappear by 2027-28. The wage bill will need to fall by 30 to 40%. Players like Abdul Fattah, who clubs were willing to pay $35 million for when Leicester came down from the Premier League last year, could now fetch significantly less with the club sitting in the 3rd tier. Every window that passes in League One makes the rebuild harder and more expensive. The 5,000-1 title, the Champions League quarterfinal, the FA Cup, Andrea Bocelli in the stadium before the last home game of a championship season, Ranieri in Rome with his mother in tears. These things happened. They are real. And the sheer distance between that version of Leicester City and this one, relegated 3 times in 4 seasons, booed by their own fans, a 6-point deduction for financial mismanagement, and a squad unable to compete in the 2nd division, is almost too large to process. This is not a club that ran out of money. It is a club that had everything, and decision by decision, year by year, let it all drain away. If you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe.